Thanks for joining us on this one. I know Kurt, Harmony, and I have all been pretty excited about this tasting, and hope you guys are too. We're excited about it in the maybe it will shatter some preconceived notions or not. I mean, I guess we're open to all possibilities there. But while we're waiting for a few stragglers, couple of little juicy nuggets for you all.
It's weird when you call me that.
What's that?
It's weird when you call me that.
Well, hey, you know, you're welcome. We got a couple of cool new whiskeys launching tomorrow. Our next newsletter, our next Malt Messenger won't be out until Friday, but we have a Canadian single malt exclusive bottling from our friends at Burwood. This is a crazy little wheat whiskey, 80% wheat, 20% barley. It's 42 months old. It's kind of incredible that it's only 42 months old because it is rich, fruity, spicy. But what's cool about it is it was matured in both virgin oak and a first fill Moscato brandy cask. That they used Limousine oak from the Burwood or from Bridgeland Distillery. They actually used their own Moscato brandy cask to finish this particular whiskey. So 57%, and Kurt and Harmony can maybe chime in on this, but like this was not on our radar. This was not something we were looking to do. In fact, they had to insist that we try the sample. They were badgering me to try the sample. It's a 500 mil. They're going to be $68, which is pretty good price for cask strength whiskey, even if it is only 500 mils. And there's only 120 bottles, and it is awesome. So
yeah, it was really great. It was a little hot at first. I wasn't sure what to think. But time in the glass and even a little bit of water, it's a beautiful whiskey.
mm-hmm.
It was awkward as hell. The guy showed up with a sample to pour. I was in the back working on a computer. I literally just replied that we didn't really work that way and we wouldn't really be too interested. Stood up at my computer and the guy was at the counter. I was like, oh, hey, how you doing? And as soon as I noticed the sample, I was like, okay, this is way more interesting than I expected. So yeah, leave us a sample and then we'll gather our wee little brains together and make a decision. And I think we were all kind of unanimous on it. It was quite cool. Way out of left field for us, so really cool.
Yeah, and for the price to quality thing, I think was the big one for me. Is it's a fun bottle. It's got lots of character. It's not just some like youthful, boring, craft young whiskey. It's got character, and that's what attracted us to it. So that's what's coming in. About the Bridgeland guys, I think it's an honor that they were so keen on finding something to work with us on. They had to badger Evan and I to go out and find time to visit them in the winter this year. But like everything we tried from them showed an incredible amount of promise. They've got a lot of cool stuff. And I think they'll be someone to watch out for. The other thing that's dropping tomorrow, again, the newsletter won't go out, is the Daft Mill 15-year cask strength, which I'm especially excited about because once again, we're the only retailer in Canada that's got any Daft Mill. Which is cool, 55.7%. It's not an inexpensive 15-year-old, but incredible amount of buzz about the distillery. I've been hoarding Daft Mill bottles now for almost 3 years. I finally have 7 different Daft Mills to put together a Daft Mill range. So we'll be doing a Daft Mill vertical tasting on a Tuesday in July after the Stampede. And I'm jacked about that. We've got our Kensington cask. We've got the 15-year-old, and we have 5 different releases of Daft Mill on top of that for the tasting. So that'll be coming up. News on that on Friday in the newsletter. I'm not going to bore you all with the tastings coming up because I'm sure most of you are already familiar with that. But as I said, we are going to drop about 4 new tastings on Friday. We have a Renegade rum tasting coming up in August. We weren't sure it was going to work because we didn't know if the product was going to be here. It will. Renegade is Mark Renier, aka Waterford, aka the guy who brought Brigladi back. It's his rum project. So in addition to some mature rums, there's also some new make spirits that we're going to be trying as part of that to see his different profiles. So that'll be cool. We have a Compass Box tasting coming up in July with some exciting new releases, the Daft Mill tasting, and one other I can't remember off the top of my head, but there'll be some new things
Tell
coming
me
up.
there's gonna be a sherry versus sherry cask.
We're still working on it. We're still working on it. Yeah, I know. Unfortunately, we were holding a date for something that we were confident was going to happen, and then it got canceled. And now it's like it would be too rushed to try to shove it into that spot. So, but we will do one. Harmony, I promise you and Jeff will get to geek out on sherry and sherry.
You can make it up for me by giving me that Dacknell Tuesday night off. That would be fun.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure we'll figure something out on that front. All right. So tonight's tasting, I don't remember whose idea this was, honestly, but it's the one I'm excited about mainly because, you know, the Diageo classic malts, you know, they're obviously whiskeys that have got an incredible reputation, but they're sometimes a little mainstream for the likes of, you know, ourselves and maybe some of you in this tasting that, you know, are into independent bottlers, cast strength bottlings. And yeah, I think it's an opportunity for us to go back and talk about some distilleries that we don't talk about very often. You know, we might have featured a Lagavulin or a Talisker in one of our virtual tastings over the last 3 years, but I'm pretty confident we haven't featured an Oban or a Cragganmore. So it's kind of cool to go back and to try those and see how they stack up. You know, full is there a Diageo rep in the room tonight? Not so much, although there might be a Talisker employee who's from Calgary, who's currently back in Calgary, but then going back to Talisker. So, you know, we'll pull some of the punches, I guess is what I'm saying on that front. But no, there's no one from Diageo on board with tonight's tasting. And I think part of that right from the beginning is we wanted the ability to speak openly and honestly about these things. And as I said at the very start, I am hopeful that, you know, it would be kind of cool if I had to eat some crow at the end of this tasting and admit that one or two of these things really, you know, really jived with me. But one thing we did observe, I don't know if all of you have done the same and poured all 8 of your drams out. There's an awful lot of color consistency between them, which is curious. Curious, especially since the distillers editions are all wine or sherry casks seasoned finishes. Either those sherry casks are not super active, or a little known culprit known as E150 may have made an appearance in some or all of them. I don't know. We don't know. Who's to say? But we're going to dive in now, if everyone's set, with Cragganmore. Cragganmore, established 1869 on the Isle of Skye. It was until very recently was the only distillery still operating on the Isle of Skye. They've now got Torveg and I think one other. Kurt, do you know?
I know Torveg. I don't know of anything else, but I do know that the Cragganmore stuff largely comes from there, like the Chevek. You guys probably know it as Teabag, that blended whiskey. That Potchgoo, yeah, there's a couple I think in that range, but that's primarily from Skye, I think. But I only know of the 2 there.
Yeah. But we're not going to start with Talisker. I'm sort of confused here. We're going to start with Cragganmore. We're going from lightest to strongest. Founded 1869 in the Speyside, reasonably large distillery, but not heavily promoted as a single malt. They do a fair number of bottlings. There have been the odd, interesting older release come out of it, but mainly from independent bottlers. The one thing that kind of strikes me as we start out here is the 40% ABV. I'm personally someone who struggles with that a little bit. I like to see that higher ABV. I love the fact that Talisker is at 45.8, getting very close enough, I guess we could say, to that 46% mark. But yeah, let's dive in and see how Cragganmore stacks up. Slange, everybody. Cheers. I think we're safe to assume here a fair amount of refill in ex-bourbon casks.
So I can't lie. I'm going to tell you guys right out of the gate, this tasting really lit me up, and I'm a huge fan of a ton of Diageo distilleries. We like to pick on the big guy. It's always a David and Goliath thing for us, I think, just because we're the little guys always trying to be the big shots. But Diageo has some of the best distilleries in the world. I can dump a list in the comments for you guys. But I love something like this. Despite the low ABV, there's a ton of personality here. It's a big, rich whiskey. You can tell it's worm tubbed. You can tell it's like that robust kind of style. It's kind of cereal forward, but I think Andrew's dead on accurate. If there's sherry casking in here, it's a lot of refill. But to me, it smells like just some tired wood, which is really, really good for the style. And
For
probably a refill bourbon.
And you know, tired wood's great, especially as you get up into those high teens and early 20s. I find the nose, like you said, Kurt, really expressive, very fruity, lots of apples, pears, moving into both citrus and melon fruit as well.
Mm.
But when I get to the palate, I find it's like a little bland and a little weak.
That's where you're fighting the ABV, right? And I'm with you on that. It seems to be that the whiskeys from years and years ago that were below 46%, maybe they weren't chill filtered as rigidly or whatever, but they seem to have more texture. Nowadays, if something's 40, it is really, really, really thin. I don't know. It's a little flat on the finish, but the flavors are beautiful. So if you're afraid of that, just keep sipping and you don't ever reach the finish.
Yeah,
How
and
many thoughts?
I agree with you. Like the nose is really pretty and it offers a lot. The palate, not so much. It feels very light. But I wonder if that's just also not solely the ABV, but to Kurt's point of how we process barley and how barley is grown these days, as to how light whiskeys feel. Even young whiskeys from 20 years ago felt fuller.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to throw one other thing at you. I'm not saying they did, but if they did add E150 to that, is that slightly oily, bitter note that I'm getting on the palate?
I actually think, based on the palate, that there might be some tired sherry wood in here as well. Nose screams bourbon to me. It allows more of those orchard fruits through. The palate tells a lot bourbon, but I think there might be a little bit of dead sherry in there too.
Yeah, back in the early times of my career, like 20 years ago this fall, Cragganmore was a whiskey that I think I had a lot more respect for. And it, you know, there wasn't as much selection back then. You know, I would say roughly half the distilleries didn't have bottlings. Independent bottlings, they were there, but they weren't kind of as prolific as they are now. And it was one of those, the Cragganmore 12 was one of those go-to malts. It's not bad. You know, would I pay money for a dram of this? Probably not. But you know, if someone offered me one, I probably wouldn't turn it down. All right, shall we see how it stacks up against the Distillers Edition?
I think we should.
And points to you guys. I don't know if I've just realized I got to get the page on our site pulled up, but do either of you know off the top of your head what kind of finish the Distillers Edition Cragganmore is?
Or
Oh yeah, you get that on the nose right off the bat.
This nose is much bigger.
it is.
Yeah.
To me, it's berries and it's kind of those like oxidized winey kind of tones you get from port, but I still get that DNA through. There's that little bit of a robust kind of nose profile that, again, I'm going to spill the beans right now. We've got 4 distilleries here, 4 Diageo distilleries, and they all use worm tubs. So they should be big, rich whiskeys, and this one shows, I think, that on the nose. Port casks are generally not my thing, and I'm going to say the same for Andrew. I can't really speak harmony on this one.
I like worm tubs.
No, port casks.
Oh, pardon me. Yeah, port casks are really hit and miss for me. Typically, I'm not a big, like they don't really get me excited, but
So the real test for that is on the palate, right?
yeah.
So interestingly, like you can see some strong parallels on the nose. This has that same kind of unctuous, really fruity apple, white fruit, citrus notes. But underneath that, you've got like this nice note of milk chocolate, leather, even like a little bit of like loose leaf tobacco, like dry loose leaf tobacco. So again, on the nose, I think this nose is great. How's the palate, you guys?
Palate's not bad. It offers some like nice, to me, nice ripe red apples.
It's really actually kind of dry and chocolate, like cocoa powdery and stuff.
Yeah.
To me, it's like when you've got a bottle of port and you let it go a little too long on the counter with the last little bit in it, and it's just kind of dumpy. I don't like the palate on this one at all. I quite like the nose. The first one definitely kind of right out of the gates is right in my wheelhouse. The palate on this one is screaming, go drink it.
Yeah. I don't mind the palate. I wouldn't go so far as to say I love it, but I don't mind it. Especially for a port cask, which is something, as we've acknowledged, I have a bit of a struggle with. Those kind of chocolate notes come in, more like an artificial, like carnation hot chocolate powder, the kind that comes with the tiny miniature marshmallows in it. So it's tasty, but again, I think it suffers mainly from the ABV. I think it's too weak. It doesn't have that viscosity that I would like, especially for whiskey, which, Kurt, as you've mentioned, is made to be a meatier style of whiskey because it's coming from worm tubs.
Yeah. And Tom and Vi
And I think you're gonna.
they like the port cask, but they feel like it may be a bit of a tired cask here, which is why it's not offering those big booming flavors.
Yeah. Starting to get a little bitter now.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
And Jeff, Spartan chocolate sounds like a great pair. Can you hear me?
I lost you there. I don't know if others got you.
It said unstable connection.
Yeah.
We're good. You're good now.
You good now?
Yeah, good-ish.
All right. Jeff's comment is cool too.
Mm-hmm. Who doesn't like a good chocolate chip cookie with their whiskey, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, let's just go for well, I mean, I can't see everybody's hands here. I can see some of them. Like a quick straw poll. Who liked the Cragganmore? And just throw it in the chat, the 12-year better, or who liked the Distillers Edition better? We do have a poll at the very end for you to pick your two favorites. But I don't think we have a poll to pick. I'm not sure how detailed Evan got on the poll questions tonight, but looks like I'd say the 12-year is kind of edging. Oh, hold on. Still close. Too early to call. So Harmony, let's start with you. Which one did you prefer?
I think I like the 12. Just the standard. More the port has like this quite a dry, kind of like I left my Earl Grey tea bag in my tea a little too long, kind of tannic note. I was hoping for more chocolate or dried fruits that I didn't quite get. The nose was really pretty though, but I don't want to sit and nose my whiskey. I want to drink it. So.
Yeah. Kurt, I don't know if you're stable enough to answer a question, but which of the two is your favorite if you had to pick one?
Yeah, the 12, definitely the 12. The 12 is right in my wheelhouse, actually. I wish the palate was a little bit bigger, but for a young whiskey, like for a young entry-level kind of whiskey, right in my wheelhouse. I like that one. Okay,
cool. Well, if I had to pick one, I would go with the 12. The port cask kind of works, but I like the expressiveness and the cleanness of the nose on the 12-year just on its own. I'd love to see that bottled at 46 or forbid cask strength. I think it could be gorgeous, but I guess we just have to settle for what it is for now and accept it for what it is. All right, you guys, shall we move on to the Oban? Beginning with the Oban 14. I visited Oban probably 15 years ago, the first time I was in Scotland. It's a small distillery, it's cramped, it's built against a cliff in the town of the same name. One of the cool little tidbits about it is up on the hillside above the town, there is a folly, which is essentially something built to look like it's a a ruined piece of ancient architecture, but this guy, to provide jobs during a time when things weren't so great, paid the local people to build something that kind of looks like an amphitheater, like a Roman style amphitheater on the hill above the town. So a little nugget there for you. Established in 1793, one of the oldest still operating distilleries in Scotland. Fairly small, less than 1 million liters of production per year. And this has been kind of, I would say, one of the bedrock whiskeys of the Diageo portfolio for a long time. The 14-year-old Oban has been a staple forever. We didn't talk about this, but the Distillers Editions have moved away from a vintage release date to just a no age statement Distillers Edition, which one of the things that was always cool about the Distillers Editions is that you could trace when they were bottled, and some bottlings were better than others, and it was fun to be able to hold tastings where you could do a vertical of Distillers Editions from different years. But that's not the case anymore. Anyway, beginning with the Oban 14, which in theory is probably mostly bourbon cask, but there could be some other casks mixed in there as well. What do we think about the nose as a start?
This is an almost perfect nose to me. This was one of the catalysts for me being kind of excited about where Diageo is going lately. About when was the first festival we did back, Andrew? How long ago was that? After COVID? After COVID.
We did a birthday festival last year before we had to start taking the tasting room apart.
Right. So maybe that was the one, but we had our friends from Diageo coming before, and this Oban 14 blew me away. I hadn't had it in a long time, and it kind of been doing this for me for a long time. I think it's right back where it should have been. I can't even conceive of how good this would be at cask strength, but I love this nose. Absolutely adore this nose. It's doughy. It's got a little bit of smoke. It's got a ton of fruits, a little bit of almost like candy fruits and jujubes and stuff. It's pretty.
Yeah, and it's got a bit of like this almost sort of sour milk, cheesy funk to it on the nose, which is cool. Like, I don't know, maybe like a Greek yogurt sort of tone. Harmony, what are you getting on this?
Yeah, I'm getting a little bit of that like smoky note, maybe some pears, apples. There's some spices on the finish, or like on the nose there a little bit, and on the palate there's a little bit of spice note. I can't quite place it, but baking spices of sorts. Not, I wouldn't go as far as cinnamon though. But I don't know, it doesn't wow me a whole lot.
Yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat here where I like the nose, but I find the palate's not really ticking all the boxes for me.
Like, I smell that funkiness that you're talking about, and I wanted to find it in the palate more than it did.
Mm-hmm.
Like the palate's got more smoke and ash to it.
Mm-hmm.
But it's everything that the nose hints at too, which is kind of what you look for when you see people write about balance. To me, that's one of the key things for balance is the nose or the palate way out of whack with the opposite kind of thing. It shouldn't be that way, or else the whiskey's out of balance. To me, the nose hints at everything the palate delivers, and that's exactly what I want. I love this one. I would buy this any day.
I think we have a bottle for you in stock.
There's almost like a hint of like licorice in here.
Mm. Yeah, Kurt, second, third sip, it's growing on me a bit.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing in there to really be critical about other than the strength and wanting more from it. Like there's no obvious flaws in it. I do find there's a bit of peat, as you said, a little bit of ash. Yeah, I don't know, for me, for some reason, I think I'm just wanting something that's a bit more expressive.
That's fair. I think I went for so long with an absolute rejection of Oban because it is so mainstream, because it is so boring, because every restaurant or steakhouse or whatever that's trying to look like they have a whiskey selection puts a Lagavulin 16 and an Oban 14 on the shelf and pretends it's classy. I think I wanted to hate it for that, but it's been killing it lately for me. I love it.
Mhm.
But we got to compare, right? That's the point.
Absolutely. Tom and Vi are comparing it to a 13 from 25 years ago. Bigger fruit on the old one, but the new one stood up better than expected. So there you go. That's that is pretty cool. This is not a distillery where I ever thought or saw fit to set aside bottles for the future, because it's one of those things where it's available all the time. But one of the things that doesn't get acknowledged enough is that every time a distillery does a batch of a whiskey, it can be similar to their previous releases, but it can never be perfectly the same. And you do see more of a drift in some distilleries than others. I know one of the ones that we talked about a lot over the years is the Lagavulin 12-year cask strength, and how much that whiskey, and I think in the last few years it started to get better, but there was a period about 5-6 years ago where it was really meh compared to what had been coming out before that. And a lot of that comes down to, I suppose, the blending, the cask selection. There's probably other factors in there too. But, Oban 14, it's in theory the same from batch to batch to batch to batch, which is one of the arguments for why some distilleries will add caramel coloring to their products so that they have that color consistency from batch to batch to batch. But I kind of like it. One of the things I loved about that old Distillers Edition range was that there was a traceability to it. Some batches were better than others, and if you knew that, you could buy accordingly.
I think it was also really cool for the sake of understanding distilleries' DNA, because it was the same whiskey, but with an extra 8 months or 10 months or whatever finishing time in a different cask. Now you've got something where the flagship expression might be, as an example, the Lag 16. The Distillers Edition has no age statement anymore. It's probably sub 10 years old. It's just a different Lagavulin or a different Oban or whatever. It's not a Distillers Edition, the same one that you're in love with.
Mm-hmm. All right. On that note, let's switch over to the Oban Distillers Edition, which is 43%. Refill American and European oak casks, and then finished in Montiafino seasoned American oak and heavily recharred new American oak ends.
That's good branding. The bottle looks great.
What's that?
That's really good branding. Like, that bottle is sexy.
Yeah, it's good packaging. And you know what? I will give props to Diageo on their core line like this. They have not sort of been suckered into the constant branding changes that a lot of other distilleries seem to buy into, that, if you change your packaging, you're going to engage a new audience and get people excited. I mean, I think whiskey people, if they're looking for what they want and what they know, that's probably not a solid business move. So if you've got a good look, why change it? Why piss off Jordy Mosky if you don't have to? Essentially, is what I'm saying.
I just will also say that I apologize on behalf of Kensington that your Oban Distillers QR code is the same as the Cragganmore.
Oh, Harmony and/or Evan.
Yeah, I'll take it. I'll take the blame.
It happens. I put the link in the chat. People can find it. Find it.
Yeah.
All right. So
I like the nose on this a lot more than I liked the regular. It's bright and sweet and a little bit of saltiness, and there's still that like little hint of smoke, but it's Jeff had said earlier the Oban 14 is like sweet and sour without the sweet, and I think this is hitting the sweet and the sour.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Kurt?
It's really nice whiskey. If there's a little bit of like Cadbury fruit and nut bar on the top of it for me, a little bit of chocolate and fruits going on there. But when I go back to just the Oban 14, it just seems like such a platonic form. It seems like the perfect style of whiskey for me. Peat levels low, like it's kind of faint, and it's just beautiful. I would absolutely take the Oban 14 over this.
So the sherry for you, that sherry finishing is masking the Oban character.
I think so, yeah.
Maybe that's why I like it.
Maybe. And Andrew, you can speak to this probably better than anybody, because you know, some of us have been in the game a long time collecting and drinking and stuff and touring, but you've been in the business of selling whiskey for a really, really long time. It's really hard to get your hands on any interesting Oban. It's really, really tough. So when we talk about the distillery character, all we're really looking at is the 14 through the ages and a little bit of random. So I don't know. It's tough to really say how that affected the spirit, but I can say I definitely prefer the 14.
Well, and it could also be suffering. I mean, Kurt, you hinted on something earlier here, which is that because they no longer declare a vintage, because we no longer know how old roughly the Distillers Edition bottlings are going to be, this could be younger spirit finished in sherry rather than something in the 12 to 13 year range finished for a year or two in sherry that might have a bit more body and a bit more structure. So it's hard to say. I have to agree with you, Kurt. I like the Distillers Edition, but I think something is lost there. There's more lost than there is gained if you're chasing that distillery, that distillate style, because you can get a very similar note. There's a nice continuity between the nose on the two, but once you get to the palate, that European oak, well, not European oak, that American oak seasoned with sherry, that sherry seasoning element is bold enough that it starts to hide some of those other tones.
Yeah.
You mentioned Little Bay. I was actually going to say this does kind of remind me of the use of Little Bay. I would bet this is sub 10 years on average. And Tom and Vi are very, very lucky. They've tried the Oban 21. I have not tried it yet, but it is on my bucket list at this point.
Yeah, this almost tastes like a cocktail whiskey. Like, I don't know. I don't know what I mean by that exactly, but it's just something that you can play with and build up in a cocktail, or that it was already mixed as a cocktail. Like, it's got so much sweetness to it. And yeah, you lose the 14, that character style in here, but I still prefer it over the 14 somehow.
I really like what you said there. I totally agree. You just kind of lit me up with that. And I'm not a whiskey cocktailer, but I think this would make a ridiculously cool, like, Scottish old fashioned.
Yeah, totally. You could really play with some bitters on this. Like, and you could go either way. You could go drier, you could go fruity.
Very cool.
All right. Just circling back to some comments. Tom and Dia with a not so subtle dig at the new Glenmorangie packaging, which I just simply ask the question, why? I think they're trying to get generation, whatever the current one is, not what is the current generation? The millennials aren't the current, there's a new generation. Who replaced the millennials?
Come on, Jeff.
Jeff will fact check us here. Regardless, I think they're trying to appeal to that Generation Z. That's what I thought. Anyway, I love the branding. I love the Glenmorangie whiskeys, but my God, the new packaging is horrible. But anyway, we don't need to go down that rabbit hole too far.
It's so funny that you said that, because a young person came in the shop and was like, "Ooh, cool font."
I have to say, I don't think that I've ever looked at a whiskey bottle, and that's been my first thought.
Oh, and I had someone say it about one of our beers too. Great fonts. And I was like, who? I mean, you drink with your eyes at first, so I guess, but
we're too close to Alberta College of Art and Design, I guess. That might be playing into it. Very cool. All right, let's do the same thing we did for the last two. A quick poll: who preferred the 14 and who preferred the Distillers Edition? We'll keep kind of a running tally here. Kurt and Harmony, I think we're already pretty clear from you two. And again, we've got a pretty even distribution so far in the chat. And if I were to weigh, I think I would have to weigh on the 14, the over the Distillers Edition. Again, I just like how clean that style is, but my God, please bottle us some at a higher ABV.
Yes, please.
That would be much appreciated. And it looks like the Distillers Edition is actually slightly edging out the 14. So
Yeah.
that's good, Harmony. You got some friends, you got some teammates.
We'll take it. Let's go. Cocktail train this way.
That's right. All right. So third up in our lineup here, we've got Talisker from the Isle of Skye. I've been there once. It was 15 years ago. I had an incredible time on the Isle of Skye. I will admit I did not have the world's best tour at Talisker, which is sad because it's a whiskey I've loved for a long time. Like Kurt, you remember those 25s that we used to be able to buy for $200, $250 that were just gorgeous. I've got a few tucked away. I wish I had more. Established 1830. It is, it's one of those whiskeys that to me has such an idiosyncratic style that like it's almost always identifiable in a blind tasting. Like there's a signature note that it has that, like say a Clynelish or Bowmore, like if you find that note, you almost instantly know that you've got a Talisker on your hand. And for me, it's this kind of chili oil spice heat, especially on the palate. It's been a number of years since I've had Talisker in a tasting, as best I can think. I don't know if we poured one over the pandemic in one of our pandemic tastings, but absolutely beautiful island. And I think the Talisker, just to go back, tour that I had was kind of crushing because I had this concept of what Talisker was, that it was all about the place and the Isle of Skye and the whiskey soaking in the like rugged volcanic environment. And then at some point during my tour, I realized they don't even mature the stuff on the island, that it just gets tankered away to the mainland. And I think that was kind of like a heartbreak moment for me as this young Scotch expert, that this whiskey I love that's so unique, we're sold this marketing concept about it, and you get there and you realize there's only like one small warehouse. That might have changed since I was there, I don't know. Our resident expert might be able to weigh in on that. Yeah, that was a rough moment for me. I am going back to Skye to see Torvig next month. So you never know, I might be able to pop into Skye again. I'm willing to give it another try after 15 years. But yeah, it's been a long time.
Yeah, that's how I felt about Isla and Kalila when we did a tasting, and you told me that most of Isla whiskey is not aged on Isla, and my heart broke.
Most of the what little warehousing Kalila has, if it's being used at all, for a while it was being used to mature Lagavulin. Because that was the one that if they were going to leave one of those whiskeys on the island, it was going to be Lagavulin. And to be fair to Talisker, Kalila, all these distilleries, most distilleries in Scotland don't mature all of their whiskey, or frankly, even most of it, in the vicinity of the distillery. Like Pernod Ricard's distilleries don't. I'm sure a lot of the other like larger groups, I mean, William Grant's is an exception because their two primary distilleries are in the same town as part of this enormous complex. But there's reasons they don't do that. There's costs of scale, having your own warehouses on site and warehouse people and people to fill the casks, like all those things is adds costs and adds money, and the industry has not been in good shape at times. So decisions have to be made.
Yeah.
But there is something unique about Talisker, even if it only spends 5-ish days on the island. There you go, very select number of casks. So, but regardless of that, regardless of the marketing, there is something really unique about Talisker. And yeah, Kurt, I've talked enough for the moment here. What do you got for us?
I love Talisker, one of my favorite distilleries, always has been. One of those ones, like you said, Andrew, those old 25s that we had here. For some reason, we never got 18s in Canada. I went down to San Fran in 2011 when my wife did the Nike Women's Marathon and brought back a couple of the old 18s. And it's almost time to crack one, I think. I miss that old Talisker profile. New Talisker, the young ones, they're okay. They're still solid as far as I'm concerned. I happily drink Talisker 10 any chance I get. If I can go up in age statements, I absolutely do. It's a distillery that has a history that fascinates me. The big fire they had, the triple distillation up until the late 20s, I think it was. Lots and lots of cool stories related to Talisker. So I haven't been there yet. I am dying to get to Skye, but it's such a detour. So one of these days when I'm going on a trip by myself, not just leading a tour over where everybody's trying to hit 1 million distilleries kind of thing, I do plan on taking a couple of days to get there. So Caitlin, who's here with us tonight, very lucky to be employed where she is, and anybody that has a business in the distillery like Andrew and stuff, I'm envious, very envious.
Kurt, something you said there like sort of triggered something in me. It was the 18. The last 3 bottles of 18 I bought were all in Hawaii. Like for some reason I can get it in Hawaii, but I can't get it in Canada. And I don't know if you remember, but actually for my gentleman's party prior to my wedding, Talisker 18 was one of the whiskeys that I poured at it. And the wheels went off the bus around the time after the dinner when I finished the bottle in the taxi on the way to the bar. That was probably not a good decision.
Might I add that you're throwing the term gentleman around pretty loosely right now?
It was a gentleman's evening. There was a gathering of gentlemen to celebrate pending nuptials.
Sure, it was gentlemen.
Sure, yes, yeah.
Do you want me to put up some pictures from that night, Andrew?
Gentlemen can be rogues as well too.
So, okay, I thought the
No photos.
18 did come to Canada, or was it the 21? What was the older Talisker that came?
25. The 25 was available.
Thank you.
There was a couple of batches of 25 that were available for about 5 years.
Yes.
I mean, it was crazy because people didn't appreciate how good it was, or frankly, how cheap it was either. And then all of a sudden, one day it was gone.
Okay.
So.
Yes, no, you're right. I remember an older Talisker being on the market. I couldn't afford it, but I remember Jay shared some of his bottle with me, and it was very, very lovely. This Talisker 10 is fabulous. While you were talking, I drank the whole thing. So if we're doing our second round, I hope we're just nosing.
No, Harmony, we're gonna go right through it. You failed. You got to save some for the speed round.
There's like a divot left, like a drop, but it's really good. It reminded me of like when I was camping at my aunt's farm. It had this she used to hand out saltwater taffy all the time, and I never enjoyed it, but it was her favorite candy, so it was something she always had buckets of. And like saltwater taffy by the campfire is like what it reminded me of. It's a great memory.
Kurt?
Yeah, it's way more phenolic than I remember. You kind of hinted at something earlier where you were talking about how the peat was being handled and stuff right now for different distilleries and stuff. I think a lot of distilleries have kind of gone the Ardbeg route where they're going deeper and deeper into the cut, taking a little more of the back end, which brings a lot of those dirty phenols. This is one of the peatiest Taliskers I remember, except for going back to really, really, really old school Talisker for those that have been lucky enough to try some of the really old kind of dirtier coal kind of style. But to me, it's almost Isla peat. It's almost like a Kalila with a bit of that chili oil that Andrew hinted at earlier. Really cool.
I'm kind of stunned by how peaty it's coming across as well, but even more so how meaty it is. I don't remember it being this meaty before. This is like a lightly peated Cragganmore to me on the palate, where it's got that like beef jerky, like brisket meatiness coming through.
It's those worm tubs again, right?
Mhm. Really nice mouthfeel. I think this is, well, this is the one for me in the lineup so far that's lit my palate up the most. The nose might not have been the most expressive. I think the Craggamore 12 and Oban 12, like that fruit was really popping out of the glass more. But for the palate so far, this one is a much more rounded, complete package than the others.
Oh, Jeff just said, I'm watching people drink Talisker out of an oyster shell. Talisker and Lagavulin are both fantastic over oysters. And they're also fantastic if you ever get a chance to do like bone luge, greasy, gross marrow kind of thing. But man, so good.
I guess that kind of begs the question, whether or not as an experience the Talisker Distillery would ever consider allowing people to do a bone marrow luge. Maybe in their visitor center, maybe they have a restaurant. They could open a restaurant and do bone marrow luge on site. That would be pretty nice.
It could be.
I'd do that. I can't do the oyster thing anymore. Some switch flicked and oysters are now dead to me for unfortunate, sad reasons, but it's just what it is. All right, let me pull up. I didn't share the bottle shot on this one, but I will. And then we're going to move on to the Distillers Edition. Here we go.
Andrew, before we move on though, can we offer Caitlin a chance if she wants to say anything? She doesn't have to, of course, no obligation, but if she wants to share anything, it's kind of cool that she's here. And we have somebody from the distillery.
More insight than we would have.
For sure.
A 10-minute oyster shack, 10-minute drive for an oyster shack. There you go. Yeah, there's the 10-year. I guess we should add, they did rebrand the 10-year recently. But I don't dislike it. So it definitely pops. So we'll call that the exception to the rule of distilleries branding almost never going well. All right, let's find the new Distillers Edition. I'll put that up on the screen here. While I'm looking for that, guys, what's the finish? Do you guys remember what the finish is on this one?
Amoroso, Oloroso sherry, I think.
That's right. That's almost as sexy as a Methuselah sherry finesse, which is of course the Dalmore way to sherry a whiskey. Almost, but not quite as. So
It's
here we
also
go.
amateur hour until you start hitting like 7 woods, like Jura.
7 wood. Seven is a lot of woods. Now our website says 43. Is this 43? No, it's 45.8. We've got a typo on the website on this one. The ABV on this is correct on the bottle, but not on our site. So here we go, Talisker Distillers Edition. This is probably the one of all the ones we've had so far where the age difference between the old Distillers Editions and the new one are probably not as great. So what do we think about the nose and palate on this? Harmony's disappeared, Kurt, so it's just you and me for the moment.
A little more tobacco-y, actually. Still some dried fruits, still some of that coastal note, a little salinity, a little bit of that peppery kind of ness going on. It seems a little tame compared to the last one, sort of rambunctious, dirty farmyard fire kind of thing going on. But actually, there's a nice little barbecue sauce sort of note too. I might actually prefer this one to the 10 this time around.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, definitely more barbecue and like almost like a meaty char on there.
I'm getting a load of like tomato paste.
Oh, interesting.
Very
Woody and grassy notes on the nose as well, says Tom and By.
Oh man.
Nose on the Distillers has it, palate on the 10 has it for me. So I should probably just marry the two together before we finish tonight and see what turns out.
Well, you can't do that because I don't have any more of the 10.
That sounds like a you problem.
It is a me problem.
Kurt, I'm gonna have to disagree with you on this. I find the nose on the Distillers Edition very closed, but the palate is like explosive. I I love how I get that little bit of like that chili oil in there. There's like a really old school feel to the mouthfeel and the flavors on the Distillers Edition for me that I don't know, that's making me feel a little nostalgic here. Like this to me is like getting to try, we've got our friend Igor from Heads and Tails who occasionally will surprise me with these little mini bottles of like Talisker from like 10-year-old Talisker from like 15, 20, 30 years ago. And the Distillers Edition reminds me of that. I really like the 10, but I think the palate on the Distillers Edition is crazy.
It just has that slightly nutty wininess there that I kind of would expect from a little bit of sherry influence, but and not saying it's not loud and rambunctious like you suggest, not saying it's not expressive and explosive, but in terms of quality, the 10 I think is better, a little more balanced. Harmony.
I think you feel that way because like on the nose, this 10 or this Distillers Edition kind of comes across like a wine cask, like, and I think you just don't like it. So just on the nose and initially you're put off by it. However, I don't feel like the palate shows the same way. And I'm with you, Andrew. It feels old school a little bit here. It's really nice. Yeah. Talisker's the winner for me so far. And don't ask me to choose one. They're both great.
Yeah, well, I mean, we're trending up here because 5 and 6 are so far my second and first favorite whiskeys in the lineup. So we're going in the right direction.
So we did have Caitlin show herself for a sec. She's disappeared, but was there?
If she'd like to, there's zero pressure if she doesn't want to, but if you want to say some nice words about Talisker, just DM us and we'll let you unmute or whatever. If not, if you just want to hang out and watch the video and drink whiskey and fire some things in the chat, fire away. So Harmony, it sounds like you're on the same page as me. You like the Distillers Edition better. Kurt's 3 for 3, Flagship over Distillers Edition. We'll see if that lasts going into the last round here.
In fairness, I do actually prefer the nose on the Talisker DB, but ultimately I have to drink it and it's what's left in my mouth afterwards, and the finish lasts a lot longer than nosing the glass. So
oh, the votes are coming in. Votes are coming in. We're choosing sides. We have 3 distillers, 2 flagships.
Mm-hmm. All right. So Caitlin has agreed to join us for a moment here. Now, Caitlin, maybe tell us how you ended up at Talisker Distillery in the first place.
Yeah. So I basically just moved to England on moved to the UK on like a working holiday visa and just went up to Skye, just traveling. Did the tour at Talisker and sat at the bar afterwards and got chatting with one of the guys, and basically he just said that they were hiring and I should come work for them. So yeah, one thing led to another, and I'm just there on like a short-term contract, but hey, I get to work in a distillery and live on the Isle of Skye, so it works out pretty well for me.
Very cool. Now, having admittedly not been there in over at least 15 years myself, what's kind of new and exciting at Talisker? Like, are there, is there a new visitor center? Like, is there, like, it's been a long time.
There is. Yeah, so actually last summer they did a full-blown renovation on the visitor center now. So it used to be a warehouse, but they've completely redone it. So there's like a nice big shop. We have like a little campfire bar and everything. It is a very, very busy place. Arguably, like in terms of Diageo, the company, it's one of the busiest visitor center in the company. So if you do come visit, I definitely recommend you book your tours in advance because we fill up. But regardless, we have like a little bar where you're welcome to try any of the whiskeys. We have the full lineup behind there. And yeah, it's just a really nice place to visit. And Skye, of course, is absolutely amazing. So
yeah, what does an ounce of one of the 40-year-olds cost at the bar?
The 41-year-old, we have drams for 300 pounds.
300 pounds. Because one of those was a 1978, which happens to be a vintage for a couple of us here. So it's been one that I've always been wanting to try, but I mean, I could get a lot of nice bottles for, do you say 300 pounds? Yeah, that's a tough one. I'll have to mull it over, but the possibility. Yeah, Skye is absolutely an incredible island. Like the mountains are unbelievable, like how rugged and steep they are, like just rising right out of the ocean. And I can totally understand why it's such a cool and busy tourist site, because for people who are into mountain biking, climbing, hiking, all kinds of stuff like that. So very cool. Now, anything that you think you or any of your associates would want us to know about Talisker before we let you go?
No, I mean, not necessarily. It's I mean, obviously you've tried the whiskey. If you like it, that's great. If not, that's totally, you know, it's definitely got its own flavor profile and everything. I guess I will mention, I don't know if you can get it here, but we did just release a new whiskey literally like 2 weeks ago called Wild Seas, which is in collaboration with a charity group that's out to protect our oceans. It is apparently available for worldwide distribution, but you might have to look into that.
We'll get it
but
in
yeah,
6 to 9 months is my guess.
probably. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, aside from that, I hope you enjoy it. It's I liked Talisker before I started working there, so yeah, it's super cool to see you guys include us in your tasting here today.
Hey, one last question for you. Whatever happened to was it the 59 North? Do they still do that, or is that, or 55 North, whatever it was? Do you know?
59 North.
9.
I don't know for sure, to be honest. That was before I started. I've heard it tossed around a little bit, but I don't know the full story. So
Well,
That was a good one.
it was a good one. Anyway, Caitlin, thanks for chiming in for us. A little bit of serendipity. Caitlin just popped by the shop yesterday or today and got chatting with Evan, and Evan made sure she left with a kit so that she could talk about Talisker, or at the very least enjoy it with us. So thank you for that. All right, Kurt. Yeah, thanks, Caitlin. Kurt, Harmony, shall we move on to the last one, the Lagavulin 16?
Yeah.
Let's do it.
All right. So
Talked about Diageo having some of the best distilleries in the world. This is unquestionably one of them.
Kurt and I have both been there many times. I'm sure a number of you have also been to Lagavulin as well. I was very fortunate. I got to be there no, it was the year before. So I was there in 2015, the year before Lagavulin's centenary, or bicentenary rather. It is an older distillery, 1816, established at least on paper the year after Ardbeg and Laphroaig, although there is some disagreement about that, as there often is. And the current Lagavulin distillery is actually, little known fact, the amalgam of two different distilleries, Lagavulin and Malt Mill. Kurt, the 16's kind of been a staple for quite some time. What are your thoughts on this dram?
Yeah, to me, Lag 16 is the Cadillac of flagship expressions for distillers. Well, a distillery has a 16-year-old as their main 1816. I wasn't there in 1816. I was there in 2016, and I did get to sing Happy Birthday Cool. I'm an unapologetic Lagavulin fanboy. I always bring back distillery bottlings. In fact, Andrew was kind enough to mule me one back on his last trip over, and I'm heading over in a couple of months and can't wait to see what they have right now. So it's really hard to get a bad word out of my mouth regarding Lag. But Nam just knows that. It's beautiful. They're a little deeper into the phenols again than they used to be, but it's beautiful.
Yeah.
And Jeff knows Ron Swanson's. So good.
Yeah. Kurt, you might want to try rebooting your computer and or asking kindly if the missus would stop with the Netflix for 20 minutes or so, because you keep breaking up on us. Regardless, I think what should have come across there is Kurt loves Lagavulin. He loves picking up the distillery only ballings, which there's often some great ones there. 100% agree on that. And the fact that Ron Swanson's a fan of Lagavulin, that goes a long ways too. So can't argue with that. Lagavulin 16 has been a favorite of mine for a long time. I think I have seen a bit of a peak and trough with that whiskey where 10 years ago, I used to think it was better. It seems to be kind of back on the upswing again. And for the longest time, just going back into my own history in whiskey, and Marty might remember this. I know he's watching the tasting as well tonight too. But about 15 years ago, we used to have to buy 25, 36 packs of Lagavulin 16 at a time because it would go out of stock. And the reason it went out of stock is not the reason that a lot of people assumed. There was rumors that, oh, there'd been a fire or an explosion. But actually, the main reason is much sadder than that. It's the whiskey bubble that burst in the late 70s and early 80s meant that Lagavulin was only operating 2 days a week right up to the end of the 1990s. So if you think about that from a production standpoint, if you need a 16-year-old whiskey, you need to have inventory 16 years projected forward. And for most of the late 2000s and the early 2010s, there just simply was not enough Lagavulin in their warehouses at age to supply the demand. And that's the reason why both it and Oban were really hard to come by for about 5 to 8 years. That has changed. Most distilleries have been going flat out since about 2008, 2009. So we're starting to see that production and availability thing improve. But I also think we've started to see a little bit of an improvement in some of the spirit coming out of Lagavulin in recent years as well. We've also seen some younger bottlings of them that have been well received, like the 8-year-old they did for their 200th anniversary, and then the regularly available 8-year-old, which is now part of their core lineup. So while we're waiting for Kurt to log back in here, Kurt, Harmony, what are your thoughts on the Lagavulin 16?
I just want to make sure actually that I haven't got my glasses mixed up. But from the nose, from what I think I have in front of me, the 16 is way more fragrant and powerful and really loading up the peat notes. And the Distillers Edition seems a little bit more muted. Can someone please correct me if I'm wrong? But
You might be wrong.
I think mine are right. Mainly because I'm starting to get some of those sweet sherry tones creeping into the Distillers Edition, especially on the palate.
okay.
Yeah, I like both of them. I've had a quick sip of both. I haven't really focused on either, but the nose on the Lagavulin 16 is interesting. There's lots of fruit there. There's a fair bit of smoke, but it's clean. I think that's one of the things about Lagavulin is it's always been very smoky, but it's also it's more of a clean smoke. It's not as rough and medicinal as some other Islay malts.
All right, I think I have it sorted now because the Distillers has a lot more like sherry notes and wine notes to it.
Mm-hmm.
It's a really beautiful nose, just as it is. Like I know I said earlier, oh, I like to drink my whiskey and not smell it, but this is one I could really enjoy just smelling. I mean, eventually I'm going to drink it as well, but it's quite nice, salty and fresh.
Am I in real time with you guys now?
Yeah, this seems to be working better.
Perfect. Don't worry, nothing I said before was important anyways. It's all gold from here though. This 16 Rockstar whiskey to me. This Distillers Edition surprises me because I came in with really, really low expectations. not to this tasting, sorry, I should be clear. We opened this for a festival not too long ago. When I tasted it, I was knocked back and I started to doubt myself. And sure enough, Serge reviewed it on Whiskey Fun too, with like an 89 or a 90 or something like that, and said, while it's probably half the age, it's twice, I'm paraphrasing, of course, but he says it's probably better than the last few distillers editions. It's probably only a 10 or 12-year-old on average, but this is a killer whiskey, really killer.
So Kurt, you're leaning more towards the Distillers Edition than the 16 on that one. Is that what you're trying to say?
I think I am. I think it's, again, based on the palate on this one, because the 16 has a prettier nose, just age has softened it, added more fruits and everything. But as a rounded whole, man, that Distillers Edition's a cracker. I want to drink a lot of that. And if that was at cask strength, holy shit.
Yeah. Now, just quickly going back to like the spirit style Lagavulin, I'm not sure if you'd agree with this, but one of the things that I always thought that was cool was from the standpoint of a heavily peated Islay single malt. Even when compared to Kalila, Ardbeg, Lefroy, I always thought Lagavulin had a cleaner, sort of more elegant smoke profile than the others.
I would agree with that. And it's kind of one of those things that it doesn't make sense, because Lagavulin has these tiny little dumpy stills that should not allow enough time or copper contact to strip it down to something cleaner, but for some reason it does. Kalila has these massive ones. And obviously they're burning them a lot faster, and that's why it seems maybe a little smokier or a little dirtier. Lag to me has a really, really robust smoke, but it also has an austerity. Like Andrew says, it's elegant. To me, it might not be as medicinal as something like Lefroy, not chest rub and stuff, but it's always band-aids to me, both fabric ones and plastic ones. Lagavulin is always really band-aidy to me.
Cool. All right, I'm still on the 16. I'm gonna move on to the Distillers Edition. Harmony, any thoughts on the 16, or are you already on the Distillers Edition as well?
I've moved on to the Distillers. They're both pretty great. I like them both. Like this is my style so far. I mean, the Talisker, I think for me was a win on both the regular and the Distillers. I agree with Kurt's points to the nosing of the Lagavulin so far. Haven't tasted the final whiskey, but just nosing. It's surprisingly brighter and fruitier than the 16. I should say unsurprisingly fruitier. It's sherry cask and multiples, so
cool. All right. I guess like with the others, this is the chance for everyone to weigh in. Do you prefer the 16 or the Distillers Edition Lagavulin? Kurt, I know you're pretty clearly in the DE camp this time. Harmony, I'm sorry if I didn't catch it. Your preferences?
that's a tough one. I'm kind of digging the Distillers again. But I prefer the nose on the 16.
And the 16 is getting better and better the longer it's too.
I agree, Kurt.
Yeah, I think right off the neck, the Distillers is a shocker, and I want to drink a lot of it. The longer it sits in the glass, the more I want to go back to the 16. Really, really cool. And I apologize, guys. When I was offline there, when Andrew asked this question, I think I kind of jumped ahead of you a little bit there. Didn't mean to.
No, we're all good. We're good. Harmony, I'm kind of with you on this. I'm really torn as to which one I prefer. I don't know if I shared this on the screen. I will, and I'll share the Distillers Edition as well. But here is Jan 16 here. The only significant change they've made in the packaging for this whiskey, which I fully support, is it now comes in a smaller box. I'm sure you guys remember it used to be the box inside the box, because there was like a box liner. And obviously for reasons of presumably recycling and whatnot, they've taken that away. But yeah, I think it's a good whiskey. I've always loved the 16, although as I said before, I think it's sort of improved a little bit again in recent years after a bit of a slump for my own taste. The Distillers Edition, to be honest, I've not paid as much attention to as I did the 12-year cask strength, which for the longest time was really my favorite expression in the entire lineup. But I'm digging the Distillers Edition tonight. I think that that might be edging slightly the 16 out. I think it's showing really well. And again, the packaging on this classic, not that the packaging matters, but I mean, for some of these iconic whiskeys like Lagavulin, you have to admit the appearance, the branding does go a long way into its own identity. And I think it really, yeah, it's a cool whiskey. And it's one of those ones where you can identify anywhere. Just from the appearance. One quick little side note on it though that I think is interesting, and I never figured this out, and I know I've told this story at tastings before, but it goes back to perception biases, things like color and subconscious decisions that we make based on cues that we might not even pick up on. And it relates back to this whiskey. I had a customer who only bought Lagavulin 16, and this goes back about 10 years to the launch of Kilchoman. And the guy's like, what's the peatiest whiskey you have in the shop? And I pulled out a Kilchoman vintage of some kind. It was like this in a clear glass bottle, very pale in color. And it truly was the peatiest thing we had in the store at that time. And it was gorgeous. And the guy looks at it, he's like, nah, it's not peaty enough. And I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, well, look at the color. It's not peaty enough. And we then got in an argument because he's like, well, peat has no color. It's measured in parts per million. The highest of which, this is before octomores, or it was around the time, it was like 50, 60. You can't see 50, 60 parts in a million. Anyway, I didn't realize it at the time, but all the Islay distilleries with their peated whiskeys were conditioning consumers to associate a dark tinted bottle with peat. And, you know, I guess part of the branding there, like Kurt, have you ever seen a Lagavulin in a clear glass bottle?
Independently through a bottler called Syndicate. I think that's about it.
Yeah.
I don't mean us. I mean a different group called Syndicate.
Yeah. Is that the Mahesh? The Mahesh?
I honestly don't know. It might be. They had some crazy cool stuff years and years and years ago from Ireland. High age statement art bags and Lagavulins and stuff like that.
I was trying to think, like there was a Lagavulin 30 years, part of a Diageo special release at one point in time that for some reason I think we might have been in a clear bottle, but I just can't remember. Who knows? Anyway, speed round, guys. We got to go back through our 8 malts real quick, and then we'll trigger the voting. Back to the Cragganmore 12-year. How is that whiskey faring after higher ABVs and peat?
Oh, it's pretty.
That nose is awesome, man.
Yeah.
Very pretty.
Really awesome. Like, and that's when you see just how incredible these guys are at their jobs when they have some of the biggest brands in the world. Like, we might not get excited about a Glenfiddich 12, but stick your nose in that and argue that it's not flawless. This is kind of the same thing.
Harmony, you mentioned licorice, I think somewhere around the Oban mark. I'm getting like those goodies on the nose and palate now. I don't know if you know those little candy coated licorice.
Totally.
Ages. Distillers Edition.
Mm. Oh yeah, that's good. A little time does it justice. Really fruity. Get those melon notes still from the regular that come through here.
Mm-hmm.
Really nice.
The cool thing is I've always sort of struggled with port casks, and after this one, I still am.
Yeah. All right, fair. Oban 14.
I love that nose.
I want to love it.
There's something so old school about it. I don't know. I think it's kind of that everything would have been peated at a period of time, and it wouldn't have been just to be heavyweights. It just would have been the convenience of drying barley with it. Everything would have had a bit of smoke to it. To me, this is old school, wicked coastal whiskey. I love it.
Yeah, I both like it and I'm struggling with it. I don't know why. I think I had higher expectations for it than I did the Cragganmore 12. And I feel the Cragganmore may have outperformed my expectations better than the Oban did.
That's cool when it's a 40%er too, right?
Yeah. Thoughts on the Distillers Edition?
It's funny. I liked the Distillers Edition more the first time, but on the second pass, the Oban 14 delivered, I think, a little bit better on the palate, and the Distillers Edition let me down a little bit more on the palate.
Kurt?
Distillers Edition is not my thing all through the palate. It does have a really nice finish though. It just slightly sour, grapey kind of at the back end of it. Really, really cool. I like the finish on it a lot, but other than that, yeah, definitely the 14 Oban.
Yeah, I agree. I think the 14 still shows better than the Distillers Edition on that. All right, on to the Talisker 10.
It's so peaty.
So barbecue and like hickory sticks and Cracker Jacks. Hickory sticks and Cracker Jacks.
Hickory sticks are my favorite snack in the world, in case you need tea.
Yeah, you do love your hickory sticks, don't you?
All in all,
Bacon,
again,
says Marty. Bacon. I totally
bacon is
get
good.
that.
Well, you can get bacon crisps in the UK. They don't call them chips, they call them crisps. And they come in like frustratingly tiny little bags.
Because they're healthy, because they're crisps.
No. Hey, props to the UK. They actually rightly declared what Subway calls bread cake. So I suppose they are in some ways a little ahead of us.
Oh, that's so funny. I still think of Subway bread as the yoga mat bread.
Oh. I mean, as good as the Oban 14 and Cragganmore are on their own, they
Talisker.
just don't hold a candle to the Talisker 10.
Yeah. The Talisker 10 is like flawless.
And Caitlin, we're not just saying this because we have someone who's currently working there in the room, because we know how Diageo works. Even if you were to say good things about us, it would have zero effect. But just in all honesty, like the whole package of that malt, I think is just a much more interesting, complex, and rounded profile.
Yeah, I agree. I'm saying I like Talisker in spite of Caitlin. But on the note of Lagavulin making smaller boxes, Talisker made their Distiller Edition boxes larger, and I would like them to bring it back down.
It's all about shelf space.
It is about shelf space, and I'm biased in that regard because I have to work with it every day. If I didn't, I probably wouldn't care or notice, because when I'm at home, I throw away the boxes. But just for waste wise, there's not any more information on that box than the regular one that demands that space.
It complicates the game of whiskey Tetris every week. Kurt?
Man, just let it sleep a little bit longer. I love it. It's a style that's near and dear to me. There's a very few malts that have that old school profile. Port Charlotte, Springbank kind of stuff. This is in that wheelhouse. It's always going to have a soft spot in my heart, but you've tried Talisker 18, Andrew. Like, bump this. It needs to go a bit more. Definitely beats the DE for me at this point. I did like the DE a little bit better at first, but I think I'm on a 10 now.
I think I agree with you, Kurt. The 10 is just, she's a beauty.
I'm going to continue to dissent. I really like the 10. It's the best whiskey up to that point, but I think the Distillers Edition is just a little bit better for me. It has a truly old school feel to it to me. And I think that's because there is some element of sherry in there.
Mhm. And like, like Kurt said so many times tonight, like Diageo has bought some of the best brands in the business. So when they do their core label so solidly, how do you compete with a batch to batch, year to year sort of concept when the 10 is just killing it?
Indeed. All right, Lagavulin 16. It's good, but I think I like the Talisker 10 better.
You can see the age on this.
You can see the age, but they dumbed it down to 43%.
Shame on that. Agreed.
I just did the Talisker versus Lagavulin for me, and it's not even close. The Talisker for me is more interesting, more mouthfeel, more texture, more flavor. And I love Lagavulin, but I think Talisker kind of steals the show on that.
I agree with you, Andrew. And I mean, I don't always agree with you, but I agree with you.
Distillers Edition.
It doesn't show as well for me.
I like it better than the 16.
It's a wild card. It's a fun one. It's the one I want as an alternative, which I think is exactly why Diageo has this as a little bit of a dessert on top of the regular offerings. But I think I prefer the 16 overall. I think I'm flagship all the way, I think.
Flagship all the way. All right. Well, I'm 50-50. Early end of the lineup, I liked the flagship. Back end of the lineup, I liked the Distillers Editions. Let's just have a quick comment on this though before we trigger the poll and before we get going. And Richard, you will get a chance to vote. Just hang in there for one moment. Everyone will get to vote. Kurt and Harmony.
Richard has voted. Richard has put his opinion for everyone to see.
But they won't be tallied unless he waits and programs them in. Real quick.
And it's only the tally that counts, Mr. DJ.
Right. So back to something we talked about earlier, that insidious little detail E150. Seeing the difference in profiles between these whiskeys, what's the verdict on that? Do we think there's E150 in most, if not all of these?
Yeah. Can I show you something for color?
Yeah.
I'll show you something crazy. And this looks like a douchebag flex, but it makes a really, really important point. We're looking at 12 to 16 years at the oldest, and they've got a gorgeous, gorgeous hue to them. It looks like polished furniture or something. This sample bottle, don't know how well you can see the color. There's at least the white label. It's pale. It's like dilute apple juice at this point. This is 1966, 50-year-old Lagavulin. And I think Andrew may have tried this cask 5.
I had it massaged into my scalp by Ian.
Amazing, right?
Twice.
I brought this back on a bus, bouncing my way to Beaumont from the Lagavulin Distillery in a glass, trying to hold the top so nothing spilled. 50 years in wood, and that's the little color you got. It shows the inconsistency of wood and the inconsistency of color. There's no way you're hitting this kind of gorgeous, uniformly beautiful shade across your range without doing some manipulation. No way. Absolutely not.
On that note, let's trigger the poll. So you get to vote for your first and second favorite drams of the night. We'll leave that up for a couple of minutes. You know what? We didn't let them chime in earlier. But starting with Sammy and then Marty. Sammy and Marty, if you guys want, you can unmute. What were your favorites tonight?
I'd say my favorite was the Talisker 10. I haven't had that for a little while, but it just performed.
And what was your second favorite?
On the retaste, I would say the Lagavulin 16.
Okay, very cool. Sammy, how about yourself?
My first pick will be the Lagavulin 16 and then the Talisker Distillery Edition.
Cool, nice. Well, very cool. Now, would you say you guys, and maybe start with Sammy, in general, do you think the flagship bottlings are better or the distillery edition bottlings are better in general?
I would say just the flagship is probably better. The distillery edition is just kind of hit and miss. Like the first couple one is just a bit too much, influence of the port or sherry cask for me.
Very cool. Thanks,
Like
Sammy.
Craggamore, yeah.
Marty.
For me, I think in general, the standard edition was just a better choice for my palate.
Now, Kurt, we already know the answer for you for that question, but if you had to just pick two whiskeys in tonight's lineup, what are they?
I want to demolish the Oban 14. It's really, really in my wheelhouse right now, just where I'm at with what I want to drink stylistically. And the Lag 16, the longer it was in the glass, the more it just kept climbing for me in terms of this lineup. And I kept bouncing back and forth between them. Wicked whiskey. But Oban 14.
Very cool. Harmony, your two favorites.
I'm between the I mean, I love Lagavulin, it's just nice all the time, but I think I'm between the Talisker 10 and the Oban Distillery Edition.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. And if you had to generalize and say one was better, flagship or distillery edition?
Flagship.
Very
Yeah.
cool. So ironically, my two favorites in tonight's lineup are the Talisker Distillers Edition #1 and the Lagavulin Distillers Edition #2.
Yeah.
But if I were to say whether flagship or distillers edition was better, I would go with flagship.
Yeah.
So I'm not entirely sure how to square those two things, but that's where my mind is at tonight. All right, the polls. Most of you have ended. Two of you have a chance to vote, but have yet to vote. So you have 30 seconds, and then I'm going to kill the vote and I'll share the results. I want to thank everybody who took part in tonight's tasting. As I said, we genuinely really wanted to do this. This was what we thought was like a cool idea, something we hadn't done, something we hadn't seen other people do in a while. And we appreciate those of you who came along with us on this little journey tonight. I do miss the days when we could very easily throw a Talisker 25 into a lineup, but what are you going to do? So I'll share the results here. And this is interesting. All of the love starts at the back end of the lineup. Talisker 10 won round 1 with the Lagavulin Distillers Edition and second, Talisker Distillers in the third, and the Lagavulin 16 in fourth. And then on second favorite, Craggamore Distillers Edition got some love. I'm guessing that was the Tom and Vi quotient. Lagavulin 16 storming ahead and winning second favorite whiskey, and then three-way tie for second. So there are the results for you. No one agrees with Kurt tonight. I don't know. They kind of agreed with him on the second favorite. I was going to say so, but this was a cool lineup. I'm glad we had a chance to go back and revisit these things. And if any of you guys have ideas for tastings you'd like to see in the future, other than Harmony, because she's got I know she wants to do sherry and whiskey.
No,
We'll
I have a
get to
different
that.
idea.
What's
Just
that?
like I have a different idea. It's still Diageo, but I know we have a lot of really cool and interesting signatories coming in.
Yes.
So like that could be a cool tasting
Mhm.
and like
It
other
could.
things.
And we've got some cool North Stars coming in next week, so that could be a cool tasting too. So there's a number of cool tasting possibilities coming up. So keep an eye on that. But for those of you who are taking part in tonight's tasting, if there's something you think that would be a cool idea, please let Harmony, Kurt, Evan, or myself know, or Sammy. We'll be happy to take that into consideration. And some of the comments here, Charlene, being relatively new, still love to try the go-tos. Absolutely. I think what was one of the things that was fun about tonight's tasting is, we can have a tasting where we geek out about weird things, but people don't drink weird things on a daily basis. They're not things you can get regularly. So it's good to kind of go back and revisit these things. And as Kurt mentioned earlier too, distilleries like Glenfiddich, yeah, you can buy the 12 and the 15, frankly, anywhere. But if you actually sit down and analyze how good those are for what they are, you'll be impressed. They're well-made bottlings, and we sometimes don't put enough attention towards those. So if anyone's got a good idea, I don't know, maybe we put a Glenfiddich versus Glenlivet, a showdown tasting to see which one's better. If
Yeah,
one
can
can
we-
be so subjective, we could have some fun with that.
I would
Um,
love to try that Glenlivet 80 versus the Glenlivet Gordon MacPhail 2000. It's like
I'm not sure that's a fair head-to-head, but
I would
I
be
understand
willing
where
to
you're going with
to try it. I'm
Life
open.
is not fair.
that. Anyway, well, on that note, everyone, thank you very much for taking part in tonight's tasting. I hope you all enjoyed it. As I said, there'll be some new tastings dropping later this week and some other cool things in store. And if you're buying the next couple days, almost certainly this will be available for tasting, as will this. So pop in. We'll be happy to pour you a sample. New tastings in the summer. Until then, everybody, have a great night. Thanks for joining us, and we'll talk to you soon.